Hi, and welcome back to Tacks, our video series on answering your toughest questions about moving from ideas to action. I'm Nicola, founder of Up With Community, a practice for connecting into our personal power for change. I am excited to be with someone that I've been admiring for a long time. I've been very inspired by your work. This is Adam Mason, State Policy Director at Iowa Citizens for Community Improvement. Hey, Adam.
Hi, Nicola. Thanks.
We are in sunny Minneapolis.
Sunny and cold Minneapolis.
Sunny and cold Minneapolis. Yeah, I really appreciate having this time with you. Over the last few months, and maybe even more than a year, we've been spending time talking and thinking about race in rural communities.
Right, and really appreciate your guidance and your help in this process.
I'm learning just as much as everybody else, so I appreciate it, yeah. Before we dive in on that, tell us a little bit more about what you're up to in the world.
Yeah, so I'm the, like you said, I'm the State Policy Organizing Director at Iowa CCI. I work with our Farming and Environment team, which is 3 organizers, and our Climate Justice team, which is another organizer. For folks who don't know, Iowa CCI is a grassroots community organizing group, statewide in Iowa with over 5,000 members, fighting for economic, racial, social justice on a number of issues.
Yeah, awesome. And I really enjoyed getting to see your community last year.
Yeah.
Enjoyed it hard, right? Because we
Yeah.
also looked a lot at the struggle. Yeah. Well, one thing I'm doing over the next few months is doing some writing about what the heck do we do at Up With Community? What do we do in the world? And one of the things I realized is we really think about identity and borders of identity, right? And one of the places that we've been spending a lot of time is thinking about how are we moving towards racial justice in predominantly or historically white rural communities. You're from Iowa, I'm from Maine, we're in the middle of it.
Right, absolutely.
And so I'm curious first, why are you motivated by that work? Why are you doing that work in Iowa?
Sure. I think for me, it started unknowingly as I was growing up. So I grew up in a small northwest Iowa town of about 10,000. It's a packing plant town. And so Storm Lake is kind of, you might see it in the news every once in a while because it is an untypical Iowa town. Today, the makeup of the town is about 40% Latino. There's a sizable Southeast Asian population and a number of other non-white cultures that are present in town. That change was starting to happen as I was growing up. The 80s and the 90s when the packing plants were breaking the unions and workers were losing their jobs, immigrants were brought in to be exploited as labor, right? I didn't understand that as it was happening. I just saw it happening around me. And today, to look back and really just reflect on that change and how the town, at a time when so many rural Iowa communities are dying, has survived and is actually thriving. So to me, I think that's just like a personal motivation that I grew up with.
Yeah. It reminds me so much of our experiences in Lewiston.
Yeah.
Right? Where the city was really at this tipping point. And we should be grateful and thankful that people of color wanted to come and live in our communities, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit more about, as you've been doing this work in Iowa, what have you been learning? What's been helping you continue in this journey?
Well, first and foremost, just working with everyday folks who are impacted by the issues that we're fighting for is what really keeps me going. I think to see the strength and resolution in people day in, day out, up against such tough odds is a constant inspiration. That's something that I personally don't have to live with. I'm fortunate that I'm privileged, but to see them continue to fight and show up day after day is a huge motivation. And to do it on not just their own issue, but over time to really start to understand and empathize with those around them and their shared struggles, right? So I think that process, and I know it's not unique to CCI, I know that lots of organizations, lots of folks in our movement are doing this work. That's a motivation. So that we're creating a bigger tent, or we're breaking down issue silos, or whatever you want to call it.
What have been some memorable moments, or one memorable moment for you on working on racial justice in Iowa? What are some things that come to mind?
Yeah, the most recent would be just this past year, with all of the attention around the border walls and with detention centers. So it turns out that ICE has only one fully contracted detention center in Iowa, and it's in Hardin County. Hardin County is also one of the epicenters of our factory farm fight back.
That's not a coincidence.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
And so seeing our members start to reflect, in a county that is losing its revenues, this is what county supervisors used to justify taking an ICE contract and to build a bigger jail. Why does a county of 10,000 people need 180 beds?
Yeah.
They don't, but they built it and then they got a contract so that they could bring in revenue. So starting to have conversations with folks and then wanting or actually seeing our members respond to that and wanting to organize to put pressure on the county supervisors, not just on the factory farm issue, but to reject this kind of ICE contract and to start calling out other local officials like the county sheriff, calling them to break the contract with ICE and doing it in a very public way, right? Not just like behind the scenes, but doing it on the editorial pages, doing it with community picnics and protests, using a wide range of tactics.
One thing that's really struck me in this work is, a lot of times the conversations that we see in racial justice curriculums or even like on blogs and popular media is thinking about how we're talking about race in urban centers. And really having that conversation in rural communities, it has to be different.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what are some of the differences you see in how you talk in the communities you're working in when you're making those connections?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think first and foremost, one of the things that we do in rural communities is when we're kicking off a meeting or meeting with a small group of people, kind of just feel out where they are. Just start a conversation about how they see the world and how they're interpreting what's happening to them, just to kind of gauge where they're at in terms of their worldview. From there, if it is a larger meeting, planning meeting or public meeting, we do like to set ground rules too, to make sure that everybody understands that we might be coming at this issue or a range of issues from different perspectives, and that we want to be inclusive and that all of those viewpoints are welcome here. And then I think what we're trying to do a better job of in practice is calling out bad behavior when it happens in the moment, in an appropriate way, right? We're not here to fully shame anybody unless they're going off the deep end, right? But to really put into practice that groundwork so that we're living out our mission. I think then beyond that, we want to help people go down that path where they really do start to empathize. So through that conversation, I think one of the things that I continually hear, especially in rural areas, is that people are so hungry for community. Yeah. They're seeing their community erode around them, and that's what they really want more than anything else, is a strong community that supports them and that they feel a part of.
So how is doing racial justice work a road back into community, right?
Yeah, and that's exactly it. I mean, if you look at, like I said, Iowa's rural communities and kind of the loss of community, what's happening of people moving out because there's no perceived economic opportunity there for a number of reasons, which all goes back to corporate control, right? And the exploitation of people. But the largest opportunity for growth in our rural areas is by welcoming new folks in. And communities in Iowa that have recognized that are the ones that are thriving, like Storm Lake, and other communities that have kind of opened their arms and welcomed in immigrants and people of color.
Yeah, and one thing I like to say about inclusion is it's not about, we stay the same, you just come live next door. And it's not about we lose ourselves in you or you lose yourselves in us. It's about we get to understand ourselves better in getting to know you and vice versa. And there's like this mutual transformation, but it doesn't have to be a transformation away from who you are.
Exactly.
It can be more of who you are, right?
Right.
Yeah, oof, that's good work. Where would you like to see things go in the next year or two? Like where do you want to see this work continue?
Yeah, I think for me and for Iowa CCI, we have to keep doing more of this work and to do it better. We're already trying to integrate it into our broader political platforms and things like that. But again, I think we just have to continue doing a lot more of the community building, and that's just so evident as we see this battle for people's hearts and minds playing out across our rural communities. It's a question of who's there to listen to them and who's there to respond and who's there to give them a hopeful vision and a way forward. So I think we want to continue doing a lot more of that, and bringing those communities together. And then I think the other thing that I would like to see is more of us across the movement. And when I say movement in this sense, I mean the larger movement, right? So that if not just community groups, but labor unions and lots and lots of different organizations and advocacy groups are thinking about how to implement this work as well.
Yeah, I like what you say about bringing listening and dialogue, because I think so often, when we look at kind of like our popular culture media about rural communities, we often characterize people living in rural communities as narrow-minded or set in old ways or like inflexible, and I think it's like so much of the opposite.
Right.
Like these are like resilient communities that are like here, that have gone through like massive changes, and it's very similar to our immigrant communities and communities in migration, right?
Exactly.
And there's so much of that mutual strength of resiliency that can be built. If we can keep going deeper with each other. Well, thank you, Adam. I really appreciate hearing this.
Thank you.
Yeah, can you shout out where people can find you online?
Yeah, so you can find us on the web at iowacci.org.
Yeah.
We're on Facebook at Iowa CCI and Twitter at
Awesome.
Iowa CCI.
Awesome, great. Thanks for being here. And you can check out all of our Brass Tack videos at upwithcommunity.org.
Thank you.